So in this video, I'm going to show you how to create this render here on the left hand side. This is the reference I used on the right, and I just wanted that to use for a bit of inspiration. And what I want to show is how to create this perspective fog back here, how to create the Forest Pro object to go with displacement. So sometimes you create Forest Pro on its surface, but if you have displacement on it, you need to add an effect for that to work. And then also how to create the terrain you see below. So let's jump straight into it. So in the scene, we have just the building, just here and nothing else. So the very first thing now we're going to do is we're going to build the terrain. And to do that, we're going to go into our create panel, go to standard and grab a plane and drag it on in the top view. So once I drag this on, it doesn't matter how big it is right now, we can always adjust it later. Once that's created, I now want to create my camera. So go up here, go to camera, drop down into V-Ray, and then V-Ray physical camera, and just click and drag this on. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the camera, deselect that. I'm going to make sure it's in the render folder, but I also want to make sure this geo is in the geometry folder. Then when I select both these, I'm going to hit W, and then I'm going to input 0, 0, and 0, so it's in the center of our world. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to hit C and go to camera. Now we want to select the camera, in this case the camera target, and we want to move this up where we see our building. We're then going to select the camera and move this across to an angle we're comfortable with. So keep going, and something like this. Also in my render settings, I have this set in common. I have this set to 2000 by 1818. Basically that's the size of the image reference I was using. You can use whichever one you want. Now at the moment the camera is clipping onto the ground because it's on 0. I'm going to leave that there for now because we're going to sculpt the terrain. There's no point moving the camera up and down because we don't know where the terrain down here is going to be. So the very first thing I'm going to do is in this plane, go to modify, and I'm going to increase this to something like, let's try 64 by 64, something quite dense. You could even go a bit more if you want. Let's go 128 by 128. And now we have lots of detail to work with. Then I'm going to add in a noise modifier, and I'm going to scale this down to around 50%, and let's see what we can use with here. So if I increase this, say 5, 5, and 5, we're starting to get a bit of, let me turn off the wireframe, sorry, there, so you can see now we're starting to get a bit of shape. And I don't want this to be too wild, because now what we're going to do is I'm going to add in an edit poly. We're going to open up our ribbon, and we're going to go to freeform here and just start sculpting. So once I select this, I'm going to turn on the wireframe again. I'm just going to start sculpting in detail. Now it's quite aggressive, so be careful how much you're putting in. Just before we start going ahead with that, now we can probably adjust our camera, because now it's, look, as you can see, it's gone even more further down. So let's grab our camera here and just start bringing this up to something we like. And again, we can always change this later. Now I'm going to start sculpting in this detail, looking at my camera. Let's turn off the layers. I'm going to be looking at my camera and see what we can do. Over here, you'll have this window where you can change the size and the strength. So if we want, we can do this to 0.5, and we can keep it the same size because we want large detail. So the first thing you want to do is I'm going to start sculpting in areas over here to block out this area, sculpt up here. And again, this is preference. You can do what you feel best suits your workflow and what you think you like, how aggressive you want these molds and hills to be. So I'm going to go for something quite subtle just to get the idea across, and something like this is absolutely fine. You can even bring in detail here, but I want to leave around the house a bit flat. So we can start sculpting in, we can sculpt in along here as well, and something like that will work perfectly. So now let's add the material to the terrain. The materials I'm using are for Megascans, using Quixel Bridge. I'm using the arid gravel ground and the rocky ground, so you can download these and then hit export and bring it into 3ds Max. So once I've brought those materials in, what I've done is I've created one material here, and I've plugged it into a material V-Ray blend. So what does that do? Well, basically I can put two materials into this, and I can use a map, which is just noise, to decide which material to use. So again, it's like a grayscale map where anywhere that's white will show one material, anywhere that's dark will show the other, and anywhere in between it will blend the both of them together. So once I have that material, I can then apply it to this. So we're now going to use a V-Ray displacement mod to add displacement to this terrain. So once you have this terrain selected, go to V-Ray displacement mod, enter it, and then around here I'm going to keep it around 0.2, but we need a text map to go in here to tell it how to create the displacement. So in your materials, the two materials we used and put into the V-Ray blend, it comes with two displacements. So we need to combine these two right now, and what we're going to do is click and drag here, go to maps, general, and use a mix map. Put that into color 1, put the other displacement into color 2, and we're going to use the same noise that we're using to blend these two to blend our two displacements. So once we have that, we can click and drag this into our texture map, click OK, and let's hit render and see if we need to do any more further adjustments. So that's what it looks like with the displacement. I'm happy with that. It's not too aggressive, it's subtle enough, and we don't see too much crazy displacement happening over here. Once that's done, I'm going to add in a V-Ray sun and light. So go to create, go to your lights, go to V-Ray, and go V-Ray sun. Click that, and I'm just going to drag it out in the top view for now. So here and here, add a V-Ray sun, replace it if you already have one, hit W, and I want this very high. Okay, so I want this pretty much on top of it. So go top, and I want this something like this. Grab the target, move this in. So we're going to get very high shadows, or very few shadows at all. So we have it like that. And now let's hit render and see where we are. So this is what we have. We have a very high sun up here, creating these sharp shadows. And it is creating exactly what I want. I want this dark, but I don't want any matte shadows going out here. And we have our displacement. So now let's add the shrubs. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this terrain, and I'm going to make it just a copy. And we're going to call this f_main surface. Make sure that's in our active layer, which is surfaces here. Make this a bit bigger. And I'm going to make sure this isn't renderable. Okay, so that's not going to be rendered, but it's the surface we're going to use. So I'm going to isolate that for a second. Then I'm going to go into my forest project, click and drag this. That's an icon mode. Go in here, name this appropriately. Go f_shrubs. And in transform, we can immediately check these. Go into our surfaces. We're going to add in this main surface here. Make sure it's on auto. And another thing I'm going to do, if I unisolate, I've created these splines here where I don't want things to populate because it's not in our shot, so there's no need to populate it. So what I need to do is go to areas, add in this spline, and change it to an exclude. So go back to surface area, and we need to switch this on. I'm going to go to geometry, I'm going to go to library, and I'm going to pick ones that I think are suitable for this scene. So I've scattered their planting around, I've picked some appropriate ones, but if I hit render now, you're going to see one issue, and that's basically some of the plants are sinking into the ground, and that's because the displacement is pushing the ground up, but the forest pro object is not going with that surface. So how do we change that? Well, it's very easy. All you need to do is go to your planting, go to effects, which is somewhere here at the bottom, click a plus, go in here, and what we need to do is we need to go to follow displace surface and click load. Once that's loaded in, we have two options we need to change. So displacement map, you need to go to the map we're using, this one here, click and drag, put this in here, click OK. And then the very last one, you need to tell it the amount it's going to displace. So you need to know the name of this surface. So if I go to pick controller, so you need to go to objects, then go to F main surface, go to modified object, I believe it is, and then V-Ray displacement mod, you need to check amount and click OK. And once you do that, you might have seen it, but this pushed up slightly. So let's hit render again. Maybe I should save this. Hit render again. And you can see those plants have now pushed up with the displacement. So to see that, I'll just hit stop and I'll save this one, and let's compare the two of them. And as you can see, the plants pop up and go on top of that surface instead of being stuck in the ground. So the next thing we need to do is we need to change the last few settings. So in here, I'm going to change the distribution to patches 2. I like a bit better. And another thing I want to do is I want to change this to clusters. Now clusters only work if you have more than one plant, so be aware of that if it's not working for you. So once I have clusters, we can change this to something like 15 meters. And then we have the patches that I want. So that's pretty much it for the Forest Pro. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add in terrain out here, and we're going to add in perspective fog. Okay, so let's add in more terrain out here. So I'm going to shift select this, bring it out here, make sure to copy, and we're just going to bring it, keep going out, and I'm going to move this up a bit and rotate it so we get something like that. So it has to be in the shot, so we can move it over like that. And I'm also going to go to the noise, and I'm going to increase this to something like 15, 15, and 15, because I want more of a dramatic effect on my terrain. I could actually go more, let's double it, and we get something like that. I'm going to increase the scale so it's not too mad, and I'm actually going to go even further out as we are. So let's go all the way out here, and you can see I'm looking over here to see how it looks, and maybe we can rotate it a tiny bit more. We don't want it too much, we don't want it to look too ridiculous. And then we need to bring one more over here, rotate it, and maybe bring it in a tiny bit, scale it up, go to local here so I can scale it just in this direction. And then last but not least, I need to select both these, and just so it works, I need to reset the X form. And that way the scale and everything will work okay. So go back to our distribution here, sorry, our Forest Pro object, go into modify, and I'm going to add in those two new surfaces we created by going into surfaces. Click plus, add this one, click plus, and add this one. And now we have that foliage over here as well. So now we need to go into perspective fog. And if you don't know what perspective fog is, basically the further something away is, we get this perspective fog, this little haze effect. You'll see it in a lot of distant photos. If you ever go to LA or America, you can always, if you look at the Hollywood sign, that's always hazy because of the distance you can see it from. So let's go in and hit render and see what it looks like. And as you can see, we can see the foliage, but we can't see the surface, and that's simple fix. If I go back to my layers, these two objects that I now created, this one and this one, are not renderable. So if I go here, you can see I need to check both these to bring it back. Go like this and hit render, and we have it back. Now you can see there is fog there, and that's because if I hit stop and I go in and hit 8, you can see I've added in a V-Ray perspective. So let's delete that, hit render, and show you what it looks like without. So you can see the haze here, and now it looks the exact same. So you can see here without the V-Ray perspective fog, it looks like, you know, one giant surface from here. It doesn't look that far away, and it makes it a bit flat. So let's add in that perspective fog. So I'm going to hit stop, exit here, and go to my environment and effects. To do that, you just hit 8, and this will pop up. So in here, we're going to click add, and we're going to click our V-Ray aerial perspective. So once we're in here, the defaults will look pretty good, but we can change this as we go. So let's go in here. Let's make this a bit smaller. And now we can hit render. So you can see the default settings work pretty well, but it's making this a bit too hazy. So the only really setting I want to do is over here is I'm going to increase this to something like 9,500, so the distance is a bit further away and this doesn't get affected. But just like that, you can see that we get a much better effect here. This looks like it's in the distance, and that's pretty much all you need to change. Like, you can change this to you want. You can change the filter color and stuff like that. You can have the effect environment raised, but for the most part, that's all you need to do. So that's pretty much the video, and the main point I wanted to show was how to create foliage using displacement with Forest Pro, how to add perspective fog, and just general how to set up camera and lighting. So I hope that's been helpful, and I'll see you in the next video.